So last week I wrote an article called "A Translator Called Me Out, They Were Right." I expected disagreement. What I did not expect was how many professional translators responded with the same message. You still don't fully understand how bad this has become. That was the message. Honestly, I think they are right about that too. The feedback I got was not abstract, it was not theoretical, it was not people panicking about some distant AI future. It was people describing a profession already being economically hollowed out in real time. I think we need to state that plainly. It was people describing a profession already being economically hollowed out in real time. I think the AI industry needs to sit with that instead of immediately jumping to optimism, which appears to be our default. The video is not about whether AI translation works. Clearly does. This is about what happens when technology becomes good enough to collapse the market value of human labor before new economic models exist to replace it. I want to take the translator's response seriously, not defensively, not rhetorically, sort of just talk about that. I'll do separate videos on where I think how we can solve these problems, but I want to talk about what they came back with and some thoughts I had. I think the question has changed. One translator, Birgit Bond Jensen, wrote something that really struck with me. Thank you for that comment, by the way. She said, we need to reframe the question from will there be translators in the future to will it be sustainable to be a translator in the future? That's an entirely different conversation. Most AI discussions still frame everything around replacement. Will AI replace translators? Will humans still be needed? Will quality matter? But the people actually living through this are talking about sustainability. Can you still earn a middle class income doing this work? Because it's knowledge work. It should be paid like knowledge work, right? Can you still build a career around it? Can you justify years spent mastering languages, culture, specialization, nuance, terminology, domain expertise? These are economic questions, not technological ones. There might also be social questions, but they're not technology questions. And I think the AI industry often avoids these questions because they're much harder to answer. I think there's a productivity trap, right? One of the most repeated ideas in AI is AI handles the repetitive work so humans can focus on higher order work. That's quite a big idea, and speaking as an AI person, you hear this constantly, right? Let the AI do the simple stuff, you can do the more complex stuff. You can unlock creativity and all of that. There's a very optimistic spin from within the industry about this. So you hear it constantly. But the translators point out something important, right? This was the original genesis of why I wrote that first article. The industry never explains what the compensation model for that higher order work actually looks like. One translator said post-editing AI output should not be paid at half the translation rate, should probably be paid more because fixing bad AI translation is cognitively exhausting, right? The feedback from the translator sort of, if I've understood correctly, you're not just translating, you're constantly monitoring for subtle errors, hidden inaccuracies, awkward phrasing, cultural mismatches, false fluency. And the dangerous part is that AI mistakes often look correct. That changes the nature of labor entirely, right? I want to talk a little bit about that particular example because it brought something to mind that So the market response has largely been you touched fewer words, therefore we pay less, right? And there's a logic to it, right? It makes sense from a certain perspective. But from the worker's perspective, right, the knowledge worker, the translator, the work has not actually become easier. In many cases, it's become more mentally draining while simultaneously less valuable productively, economically, right? So let me jump on that a little bit more. It's become more mentally draining while becoming less valuable economically. I think there's a productivity trap that is happening in many industries. The efficiency gains don't flow to the knowledge worker. They generally flow upwards to the buyers, to platforms, to companies, to whoever controls distribution. But this is quite an important thing to do, to point out that the work in some ways has become harder, but is simultaneously less valuable. That's kind of unsustainable, right? I think that goes back to the first point, where how sustainable is this? Another thing that one of the stronger comments, at least my takeaway, was the cruelty of the transition. I think one of the strongest comments I received described the situation as cruel. And I think that word matters. There's a specific emotional dynamic happening here that people outside these industries sometimes miss. And as a technology person myself, I probably missed for quite a long time. What they're being told simultaneously is your expertise matters, human nuance still matters, cultural understanding still matters, while simultaneously watching their rates collapse in real time. Right? That's quite cruel. The contradiction is psychologically brutal, especially because many translators are not anti-technology, right? This is important. A lot of these people are not people who are refusing to adapt. They're not Luddites. Many have used CAT tools for years. They adopted translation memory systems, terminology databases, workflow automation. These are not technophobes, right? The argument is not technology is bad. The argument is the economic value of our labor is collapsing faster than new forms of value are emerging. And I think this is accurate, right? Like it is a valid way to explain what is happening. There's also an AI training problem. Another thing translators brought up repeatedly was something the AI industry still doesn't particularly like talking about openly, right? The work is being used to train the systems replacing them. One comment said, every edit, every adjustment, every management action your users take, squeezed for intelligence and fed back into the engines, right? You should go have a look at the actual comment. I'm paraphrasing here, but squeezed for intelligence and fed back into the engine. That sentence is uncomfortable as a person who works with AI. It points to something structurally different about AI compared to earlier tools. Historically, tools amplified labor. AI increasingly absorbs labor. Every correction becomes future training data. Every edit improves the model. Every high quality translation potentially reduces the future dependence on the translator who created it. And whether people think this is inevitable, good, bad, ugly, necessary, it fundamentally changes the emotional relationship workers have with the technology. Because now using the tool can feel indistinguishable from participating in your own displacement. That's a very different psychological contract. There's an economic contradiction at the heart of this. And this was another thread running through some of the comments. And these are comments across Medium and LinkedIn and Twitter and such like. Several people basically asked if AI keeps reducing the value of human labor everywhere, who actually has money left to participate in the economy? That's very valid. It sounds dramatic until you realize how many industries are beginning to ask versions of the same question. Translation, writing, design, programming, support work, research, media, coordination tasks. I think there's also a gender dimension to this, but I don't want to go there at the moment. I don't know that I have the information to. But when you look at the jobs being impacted, they're largely white-collar roles and knowledge worker roles and coordination roles to some extent. The core tension is this. AI massively increases productive capacity, but capitalism still distributes income primarily through labor. So what happens when society becomes more productive while human work becomes less economically valuable? Right. It's not necessarily a translation industry question. It's a economic question that I think we all need to look at, and I don't think we have great answers. But it is an important question. Why I think the translators matter. One reason I think translators are important to pay attention to right now is Canary in the coal mine. They are simply earlier than most industries at the bleeding edge of this. Translation is one of the first knowledge professions to experience full-scale AI commodification. Right. Let me repeat that. Translation is one of the first knowledge professions to experience full-scale AI commodification. The outputs are digital. The evaluation criteria is probabilistic. The work maps extremely well onto large language models. Right, like that's why I think Canary in the coal mine. So translators effectively living through a future many other professions are only beginning to glimpse. Right. And what they are telling us is this. The technological transition is moving faster than the economic transition. Much faster. The tools arrive first. The compensation models have not arrived. The rights frameworks have not arrived. Labor protections have not arrived. New ownership structures have not arrived. And the people caught in the middle are absorbing the shock, personally. I want to be clear about something. I still think AI translation creates enormous positive value. The first product I built is a tool called Video Translator AI, and it is a little interpretation tool for clinicians and doctors when a translator is not around, right? That's how I got involved in this. So I clearly believe that AI translation creates enormous positive value. I believe multilingual communication becoming cheap and accessible is broadly good for humanity. I think this is a win. I believe millions of interactions that previously never happened now can, and this is a net positive. But I also think it's possible for technology to create real societal value while simultaneously causing genuine economic pain to specific groups of people. These things can be true at the same time. I think translators responding to my article deserve credit for forcing that contradiction in the open instead of letting the AI conversation stay comfortably abstract. Right now, a lot of people are still talking about productivity in AI. Translators are talking about survival. And these are not the same conversation. I'll leave you with that. I hope this was useful, and thank you to all the people who came back and added their 2 cents and their perspective. I think it was really valuable. Thanks so much.